Place your right hand over your heart, and will you please rise for the sounding of ten?
just want to welcome everybody, thank all the friends and the family, the people from close and from far, for turning out on this very special opportunity to share our thanks and our love and to give credit for the very special uniqueness of our beloved Norman J. Potiker. Norman was the father of Cheryl, of Ellen, of Lori, and Michael, the devoted grandfather of Craig and Alex, Andrew, Brett, Kara, Phoebe, Franklin, and Lillian, as well as the great-grandfather of Grant, dear brother of Howard, and the late Lucille Edelstein. To me, what is special about this event is that everyone deserves their time in the sun, their honor. But for Norman, he was a person who was always trying to find who he was, to celebrate who he was. Everyone made birthdays, or birthdays were made for them, but he was the one who made his own birthdays. He felt very proud of who he was, and he wanted to celebrate all that he accomplished. So I think of what we're doing today as not just honoring him, but we're throwing him a party of sorts, a celebration. Of course, it's bittersweet. Of course, we wish he could be here to celebrate the party with us, but this is what he always wanted, to celebrate who he is as a person, his personality, his special ways. And hopefully by celebrating him and how he lived the whole life of 86 years of being his own person, that will give us comfort, that he had so much strength and courage and spirit. I wanted to share with you a selection from the Psalms, Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo iksar, Binai steshe yarbitzeni, almei menuchos yanachaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit samaves, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha o mishantecha, hema yanachamuni. Tairach lefanai shulchan, neged sarai. Dishante v'shem en roshi, kosi revaya. Achtov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai. V'shavte v'beis Adonai, le'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in right paths for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou hast set before me a table in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I wanted to share with you a selection. It's entitled, I Live On. Don't cry for me in sadness. Don't weep for me in sorrow. For I will be beside you, as sure as comes tomorrow. My body has gone, but my spirit lives on, as does my love for you. Just as in life, I'll watch over you. I always will be true. My blood lives on in my children and my family. I'll watch them grow up with pride. I'll live on within them, always by their side. I know my jokes weren't always funny, and jobs weren't always done. Just try and always remember the good times, the days when we had fun. Reach out if you need me, for I will be near. Just talk to me as if I am there. I promise I will hear. For I'll live on within your minds, we'll never be apart, as long as you keep my memory deep within your heart. So lift up your hearts, don't be sad. My spirit hasn't gone. While you're still there, so am I. I really will live on. Today I hope to share with you a few words that are inspiring and interesting and a little bit funny at times. A lot of these words come from his dear children in the time that I spent with them, sharing a lot of time talking about Norman. But I must admit, a lot of these stories comes from the fact that myself, working as a chaplain at Montefiore, was very curious about this individual. You know, Norman was at Montefiore for quite a while, but I must admit I didn't really know him so well. But he was truly a curious figure. He was an older man, but he had massive muscles. He moved at a fast pace in his wheelchair, and he moved directly to the treadmill or the bicycle. like he was a man on a mission. He never attended programming events. He didn't want to be seen with the elderly. But at the same time, he was very personal and very friendly and just loved being with people. He seemed a little bit stubborn, a little bit ornery at times, but at the same time, the staff loved him some days, and occasionally they felt they had enough of him. He had this very special family that at times would get a little frustrated, but most of the time would be in love with this man in all of his unique ways. He, of course, tested everyone's patience, but in response to that, he just got a lot of love and caring and attention. So this opportunity that I had to get to know him when he was sicker was really special for me because it answered up all these questions. How did this guy pull it off? How do we create a man? How did this man come to be as special and as unique as our Norman Potiker? So like I said before, this is his celebration. This is his birthday party. The only difference is that when he made his own birthday parties, he was the one that invited people. He was the one that made sure he had the big cake. And he was the one that made sure that he had the big speech about himself well prepared. And many of the times his children, when they were talking about his traits, they kept on saying, well, he was a child of the Depression. He just didn't grow up with anything. He was lacking and life was hard. And that was often a very good excuse, a very good reason for the way that he was. He always liked to show off himself, his own talents, his body, his stamina, his mind over matter. He liked it when people admired him and couldn't believe what he had accomplished. And indeed, like I said, he had accomplished a lot. He grew up in the Depression. He grew up with a family, a mixed marriage of an American side and a European side. At one point, he lived in a very nice house in the Forest Hills neighborhood, but later on, after the Depression, the family struggled to make ends meet. He was very proud of who he was and where he came from, as a Jewish person who did it all his own way in his own style. Part of his strength was his strong will, his stubbornness. It had to be done his own way, or else. And furthermore, if he had forgotten how he had done it, that wasn't a hope either. You could never hope that he forgot what his way was. You could never hope that he forgot one little mistake that you made, or one good thing that you did some time ago. He had a true memory, a memory of an elephant. He never forgot anything. And he was, of course, very opinionated, not just in himself, but as well as to others. He didn't always have a sense for what he should say and what he shouldn't say. But at the same time, he was this beautiful, charming man. He had a great smile. He had a great attitude. He was a lot of fun. So, of course, sometimes you got a little upset with him, but a lot of time you would let things slide like it was no problem. What was funny about him was this stubbornness translated into a love of winning. He always had to win. And his focus wasn't on winning the big stuff. It was often on the little things. You were not allowed to beat him at a board game. It didn't matter if you were his grandkids. It didn't matter if you were a 90-year-old man in Montefiore playing him a game of checkers or something. You were not allowed to win. He would not let the rules get in the way. He would not let anything get in the way of the win that he so desired. And his kids would say that sometimes they would be playing a board game at home, and it would get into the late hours. Bedtime was upon them. And Mom was saying at that point, it's time to go to bed. It's 11 o'clock already. But Norman says, no, I can't let the kids go to bed. We got to finish this game and make sure that I'm the winner. Winning was the only option for Norman. As we said before, his speech wasn't always funny, even when he intended it to be. And he didn't always know when he was touching on a delicate nerve of other people. But he sure tried. He was always trying to be funny, to make jokes, to say things that were interesting and illuminating. It was because he just loved people. He wanted to be with people. He was a people magnet in every way. The thing about him was he wasn't just about kindness, just about humor and talking to people, but he really wanted to help people. He really wanted to find a way that he would be there for anybody, to help anybody who needed help. And he wasn't always happy with the set of friends he had. He always wanted to look for new, more and more people to add on to the previous batch. He so badly wanted to give to people that despite the fact that his character perhaps wasn't so set up for it, he wanted to be a teacher. So he set out to be a teacher. He tried teaching Spanish. He tried teaching music. And it seems like it wasn't a very big success. A lot of his character traits got in the way. But you can't help express admiration for his wishes, his intentions that he could give to other people in the form of knowledge. His kindness was towards people, but it was also towards animals. He just loved animals. He loved nature so much. In fact, at home, he tried to keep at least 6 dogs. And for one reason or another, it didn't work out, but his will was there to have pets at home. And even later on in his life, he tried volunteering. And to be a volunteer, you have to follow a lot of rules. You have to do a lot of documentation. You have to really, toe a tight line of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. So I imagine this was a delicate endeavor for him, but he tried. He spent some time working as a volunteer at Menorah Park. And later on, when he himself was in Montefiore, he decided that he would be a volunteer also. And of course, it's an unusual fit. How can you be a resident in a nursing home, and volunteers are supposed to come see you, but at the same time want to be a volunteer yourself? So only a few people could pull this off, but he did it himself. But perhaps the fact that he was never seen at programs helped the fact that maybe people didn't know exactly what his role was. Was he a resident or not? And that helped his case to be a good volunteer. In terms of marriage and family, we'll see soon that that is the main thing to him. I'm going to reserve this beautiful piece of his life for his son and for his grandson to talk about Norman, the family man. But I did know that he was married to Margot, and Margot gave him 4 beautiful children. And I'm sure that Margot had this as an exercise in much patience and tolerance. And it wasn't so easy being married to a man as grand and as gigantic, not in stature, but in his speak, as Norman Potiker. And sometimes maybe his way in life wasn't always so compatible with the married life. He was just too active, too busy, too moving on, too thinking big, too thinking a lot of the time like a child and having fun, that it wasn't the perfect marriage match. But I'm sure Margot tried, and everyone tried their best to make it work. People always thought of him as the diamond that was always there, that just needed a little extra polishing. And as a dad, he did the best he could. Even though he had his job as a traveling salesman, he was away from home quite a bit, he always tried his best to make sure that he was there for his kids no matter what. He loved pampering his 3 daughters with fun and with games, with ice skating, with skiing, with sport, and with many treats. And he sure loved being a grandfather, and he would be so happy to see all his beautiful grandchildren in the next room, and the fact that he was even able to witness with his own eyes and feel with his own hands the fact that he was able to become a great-grandfather. But as I've alluded to, one of his secrets was the fact that he never grew up, that as his cousins, I believe in Atlanta, would call him frequently, he was the true original Peter Pan, the boy who never wanted to grow up. And this was manifested in many ways, as we've said, but in one in particular I don't want to spoil for the other kids, was that he loved to hold neighborhood softball games. He would get his kids to be the recruiters and pull kids in from all over the neighborhood to make as big a game as possible. And this was his joy, just being part of the kids playing their sports in the backyard. And there was one time when the neighborhood kid hit a ball right through the house window, and he could have been very upset and very angry and acted like a parent would in that circumstance. But instead, what did Norman say? He just said, "Fair ball," and enjoyed every bit of it. What was his way in life? What was his secret? Part of it was a sort of simplicity. As we'll see soon, it's not a pure simplicity, it's more of a nuanced simplicity, if that's possible. And he certainly espoused the simpler life. He didn't want to have too many material possessions. He liked a little bit of cars, but we'll not worry about that for now. He didn't really value his career success too much. He felt the focus should be on nature, on music, on people, on the stuff that is, again, more simple. But parts of him were not so natural. He loved junk foods, he loved Twinkies, he loved malt shakes, but at the same time he enjoyed juicing a good carrot or two in the blender as much as possible. One of the ways that he expressed his love for the simpler life was through his love of nostalgia. His room at Montefiore was like none other. It was truly a museum. And if it's possible to walk into a room and think that it's black and white, it was possible in his room. You really felt you were walking into an old movie. There were old newspaper clippings on the walls, old pictures, there were antiques, there were scrapbooks, and there was, of course, his Edison Victrola phonograph right there, center of the room. And as kids have told me that this is how his house was. His house was set up exactly like that, as a museum into the past. As much as he was a simple person, he really wanted to set out and explore the world and see all that he could. When he could, in his easier years, he did some backpacking and traveling, and he enjoyed especially going to places where he had good memories. He went to Spain, he went to Paris. Why those places? Because those were times that were very special to him. When he was young, when he was initially in the National Guard, and then he went from reservist to active duty, serving in the Korean War, those were places that he was sent to, and he felt that he was very relevant and did a lot of good things. He painted license plates in Paris for important people, I forget who. And most importantly, one of the things he most often talked about was that in the morning the soldiers would gather, and what would they do with him? They would do calisthenics. He was a leader of the physical exercise, the calisthenics, with all the soldiers in the morning. And he was very proud that he was able, in his own unique way, to serve his country very proudly. Another secret of his life was not just his simplicity, his nuanced simplicity, was the fact that he always kept busy. His only speed of operation was high speed. Even his leisure days were packed with activities. A Sunday, a weekend with him, was going from one project to another. He was gardening, he was planting, he was doing trains, he was going out somewhere, he was eating, etc., etc. He was unstoppable. And this was true also with his work. He was blessed with a work that allowed him to be who he was. He was a gentleman who could not have a boss, could not have too many rules. So again, the role of the traveling salesman suited him very well. So all week long, he was on the road promoting auto parts and toys and encyclopedias and selling insurance and more. It gave him the freedom that he so enjoyed, and it put him in touch with the people that he so loved in this world. But again, one of the key things that made him successful, I think, was his courage. He was a man with tremendous courage and bravery. It expressed itself in his military service. It expressed himself in his love of sport. And even though he was a man of very small stature, and he wasn't very much blessed with super athletic abilities, not speed, nor accuracy, or whatever, but he found early in his life that he wanted to become a boxer. So his golden gloves, his seeking of a massive boxing tradition or trophy was his goal. And thanks to his namesake, to his Uncle Norman, he was able to pursue this. But again, he wasn't so successful. He didn't win a whole bunch of matches, but this was the way he showed his stuff. He showed how strong he was and how courageous he was. He never gave up in many areas of life. In particular, he was plagued by knee issues. His knee issues were so bad that he couldn't walk. He had to use crutches. He had to use a cane. But he didn't want to be like this. He didn't want to live a life that was limited by his own knees. And he saw no less than 30 different doctors in the hope that he would find a cure for his knee issues and be able to be the person he wanted to be. He would never give up after all the doctors said, "I don't know, I can't help you," etc. And it was the same fierce courage that he used when he found out that he was diagnosed with colon cancer. Of course, this cancer took away his strength. It took away his energy so much. But his response was not to sleep more or to do less, but it was to do more. And he really believed that if he could keep up his exercise regimen, he could keep up with the treadmill, keep up with all the exercise, then he could beat this cancer in his own unique way. And that's how a lot of us at Montefiore remember him, as making his way over to the exercise equipment. And he didn't always talk about it, but it was hard at first. It was hard at the end, because he couldn't do his 45 minutes that he dreamed of. He sometimes could only do 20 minutes, or 15 minutes, or 5 minutes. He really struggled. But the amazing thing is that he struggled, and sometimes could only do a few minutes of exercise, but he still made sure that he made his way over to the exercise equipment, to the rehab center, to do what he felt would keep him strong and healthy. At Montefiore, he was truly adored and admired. He was loved by so many of the staff and all the residents. Like I said, he was so charming and so interesting and so caring and so devoted, and we truly had never seen anyone like him. I think that a lot of time what happens in a nursing home is that people change who they are. They give up their identity, they give up their independence, they give up their stubbornness, and they just do what they're told. And that was not something that Norman ever did. And that was his strength until the very end. But in closing, I don't believe that a person, even a Norman Potiker, could be so strong and so courageous without one key ingredient, and that was his family. His family is going to speak and explain to you how this works, but I just want to share how I observed how much they cared for him. And like I said, you guys were so caring and so patient, and you always showed him so much love. And that's what he needed more than anything. He was a kid at heart, and a kid wants love and kisses and attention. And you guys so beautifully gave that to him, even when he was having his most stubborn days. So, we thank God for this beautiful person. We thank God for his stubbornness. And myself, who works at Montefiore, thank God we had some backup from a beautiful family that kept this man going, helped to make our work a little bit easier. So at this point, I call upon his dear grandson, Andrew, who'll be representing his grandchildren.
Thank you. 4 things come to mind when I think of Poppy Norman: family, games, stories, and sports. I have the privilege of speaking on behalf of all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I'm honored to speak for my wife Shannon, my brother Brett and Courtney, my sister Kara and Jeremy, my cousins Craig and Bridget, Alex and his wife Christina, Phoebe, Franklin, Lillian, and my son Grant, Poppy's great-grandson. We all knew how important family was to Poppy Norman. My cousin Alex mentioned that when we were at lunch, he would always check the time to see if we were with him for an hour, and if we weren't, he would ask that we stay until an hour was up. He thought that our days should be spent only with him. My sister Kara mentioned that he always incorporated us into parts of his life, whether it was his love for his train set, where he named different parts of the town after each one of us, or by hanging up a photo gallery of pictures of all of us throughout the years. Poppy recently told my mom what great kids the Potiker kids are, and she could tell how proud he was of them. We were so happy that he was able to make it to my wedding and to Alex's wedding. On a personal note, I'm thrilled that he was alive to see the birth of Grant, my son, and his great-grandson. When Shannon and I told him we were having a son, he said he was starting to give up on having a great-grandchild, but that he always had faith in me. We weren't sure if he would make it because he was already starting to decline. Even though he wasn't feeling well, he called my wife every week or two to see how she was feeling. We could tell that it meant a great deal to him. We chose to give Grant the middle name James, both in tribute to my late aunt and also for my grandpa, as his middle name is James. We weren't sure if he would make it to see Grant's birth, and we wanted to pay tribute to him in some way. Thankfully, Poppy Norman was alive when Grant was born, and he was able to meet his first great-grandchild and spend some time with him before he passed away. He did keep asking Shannon if my 1-month-old son could talk yet, so I think he was anxious to see him grow up. I mentioned games separately from sports in the beginning because Poppy loved playing all kinds of games. He was thrilled when any of us came to his house or later on in his life showed up to Montefiore to play games with him. He was extremely competitive and would always try his hardest to beat us in every game. Alex, Craig, Brett, and I have fond memories of playing Monopoly with him at my parents' house in Beechwood. He would do everything possible to beat us, even though at the time we were all very young. He'd even pick up the instructions at times and pretend he was reading the rules, but really he was just making something up in order to gain an advantage over us. He was very skilled at this, and I later learned that he used to do the same thing with my mom and her siblings. We were onto him pretty quickly, but he'd continue to do it. Phoebe told me that she remembered a game of Quiddler they played at Montefiore where Poppy accused Lillian of cheating because she was beating him in the game. Lillian is 11 years old. Poppy did this to be funny, but more so we really think he was just doing it so he could gain an advantage over us. Poppy Norman loved telling stories and really loved telling stories about sporting events. My favorite one is one he recently told me again. Uncle Michael, Poppy Norman, and I were going to an Indians game together for the first time. This was at the old municipal stadium, and we had some seats that weren't great. He was telling me how proud he was that this was the first time he was at a game with his son and grandson, and how much he was looking forward to it. He then went on to tell me that I saw my late Uncle Dane sitting close to the field. Then he changed his voice to sound like a little kid, to impersonate me, to relay that I asked him if I could move up to sit with my Uncle Dane and to not sit with him anymore. Poppy was in disbelief that I didn't want to sit with him anymore. He told me the story at Montefiore a couple months ago and still remembered every detail. He couldn't believe that I had no memory of this. It struck me how vivid his memory was, and also, once again, how important family was to him. Many of our childhood memories revolve around sports. We remember playing football in the backyard when Poppy was the quarterback of one team and Uncle Michael was the quarterback of the other team. We remember taking trips to see baseball games and spending time with him and getting to listen to his whole catalog of stories. We remember him coming to my parents' house to watch football and reciting his usual lines like, "How does he talk so loud?" referring to the official. Or, "How do they get that line on the field?" referring to the first down line. We remember only a few weeks ago when the last time he left the nursing home was to come to my parents on a football Sunday. We knew he wasn't feeling well, but it was very important for him to spend that day with us doing what we used to do, and we could tell he genuinely enjoyed it. We remember him coming to our games when we were younger. He couldn't stop talking about the time Craig hit 9 3-pointers in a basketball game for Orange. Poppy was a huge Cleveland sports fan. He attended the 1948 World Series, which was the last time the Indians won the title. He also attended the 1995 World Series in Atlanta with my dad. Poppy was in the stadium for the 1964 Browns championship and was thankfully still alive to see the Cavaliers win the title this past June. As the Indians approached the playoffs this season, we were hoping he would be able to make it to the end of their playoff run, but we weren't sure whether or not he could. I think at times he was enthralled by this team and enjoyed watching the games and cheering them on. At other times, when he wasn't feeling well, he would stop watching or not want to talk about them, and my suspicion is that he did this because he wasn't sure if he'd make it to the end of the season. He was in hospice when the playoffs started, but was still excited for the start of it. He called me on day one of the playoffs to find out what television stations that day's games were on. Poppy told me that he would call me every day of the playoffs to find out what games were going on that day. He was able to watch the division series and saw the Tribe advance to the American League Championship Series. He started to slip a bit during the ALCS and really struggled to watch the first couple of games as he was deteriorating further. Poppy Norman passed away early Thursday morning, only hours after the Indians defeated the Blue Jays to win their first pennant since 1997. He wasn't aware of what was going on that day, but it still struck all of us that he died so close to the team winning the pennant. He lived a long life and experienced so much and left quite a legacy of children, grandchildren, and stories to last us a lifetime. I just wish that I would have been able to receive those calls from him for another week or two as the Indians begin to play in the World Series. He would have enjoyed it so much, and I know my whole family will be thinking about him as the Tribe tries to win the title for the first time since 1948. However, we know it wouldn't be the same without him.
So I call upon Norman's son, Michael, for a few words.
Hopefully I can be as strong as my dad was. I asked my sisters if I could give my father's eulogy. What a daunting task, capturing the essence of a complicated man's life of 86 years and 20 minutes. I will give it my best shot. My father had a book at his house titled The Indestructible Jews. I thought there should have been a sequel, The Indestructible Norman Potiker. But no, my dad lost his battle with cancer on October 20th. I was asked to identify his body in the bowels of Berkowitz-Kumin. I was alone with my dad as his body lay breathless, motionless. I leaned over, kissed his forehead, told him I loved him one more time, and solemnly exited through the swinging doors, never to see him again. But I have been thinking about him constantly. How do you describe a man that's indescribable? These adjectives may be appropriate: complex, delicate, opinionated, deep, stubborn, enigmatic, formidable, intricate, obstinate, perplexing, profound, eccentric, extraordinary. If you met my dad, you would never forget him, whether you liked him or not. After my dad's passing, my sisters and I were sitting in the meeting room at Montefiore to discuss today's events. I left the room to get my dad's notebook where he stored all of his important information. There was a gentleman standing outside the door from housekeeping. I said to him, "May I help you?" He said, "My name's Carrie. I'm here to see Norm." I told him my dad had passed away early this morning. He entered the room with me, sat down, and started to cry. He said to me, "I helped your dad move into Montefiore 1 year ago. We would talk for hours when he was on the second floor." He then uttered these words, "I loved your father." I stood there speechless. There has never been or will never be another man like my father. My father was inimitable. Webster's defines inimitable as so good or unusual, yes, he was very unusual, as to be impossible to copy, unique. The indelible impression my dad left on the people he met was unparalleled. He loved people, and people loved him. His favorite saying was, "This is what it's all about." Several years ago, my mother and I were en route to Park Synagogue for Yom Kippur services. I said to my mom, "It seems like yesterday that we were just here for the high holidays." My beautiful mother responded with one of her proverbial Yiddish sayings, "Den ganze Leben is a Chulm." Your whole life is a dream. My father's dream is over, but his legacy of devotion to his family and friends will never be forgotten. If there was one song that could define his life, it would be the Beatles song, "All You Need Is Love." As John Lennon quipped, "All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, love. Love is all you need." Every time I would be with my dad, it always began and ended with a hug and a kiss. It seemed so awkward. None of my other friends' parents or fathers were hugging and kissing them. If I could ask him today, "Dad, why did you always kiss me and hug me every time I saw you?" his response would be, "All you need is love." My father's dream was to have a large house in Cleveland Heights, living with all of his children, sons-in-law. If you notice, I said sons-in-law, not son-in-laws. My father was a stickler for grammar. And his daughter-in-law, and all of his grandchildren and great-grandchild, living happily ever after. We would laugh and tell him this notion seemed so strange, but not to him. I'm sure his response would be, "All you need is love." My dad would take our whole family to eat dinner at his parents' house every Sunday. He also frequented his aunts and uncles' homes on Sunday evenings. All you need is love. He also when he would take us ice skating, tobogganing, playing racquetball, to Indians, Cavs, Force, Barons, Crusaders, and Browns games. All you need is love. He organized 2 fun-filled family reunions with the cat side of his family. All you need is love. His wonderful relationships with his friends Nancy Gould and Carl Anderson, and to his devoted nephew Joel Edelstein. Joel would help my dad with technology and fixing things around his house, my father's house. Joel also spent countless hours transferring boxing tapes to DVD, which my dad loved. And to my loving sister Lori, for being there day in and day out while my dad was in hospice, bringing him pillows, blankets, tomato bisque soup from Nordstrom, ribeyes and baked potatoes with 2 butters and 4 sour creams, and don't forget them, from Brown Derby, candy, crossword puzzles, and popsicles. All you need is love. Did I forget anything, Lori? My father also loved his country. He was in the Army stationed in Europe. He was so patriotic that he would have his children marching around the house as Kate Smith belted out "God Bless America." He loved to work out almost every day since the age of 16. He loved sugar, malts, candy bars, donuts, ice cream. His two favorites, butter pecan and dark cherry. Twinkies and cookies. When he returned home from business trips, his car was littered with candy wrappers. He loved gardening. He loved to watch his grandchildren play sports. He loved to paint. Yes, he painted our house in South Euclid black and orange for Halloween, and red and white for Valentine's Day, and many other color combinations, as the unsuspecting people bought our house in South Euclid found out. He loved his cats. He loved Cleveland sports teams. He attended the 1948 World Series, like Andrew alluded to, the 1964 championship over the Baltimore Colts. It was a freezing day. He wore a t-shirt to show how mentally strong he was. He was freezing, he told me. He was an usher at League Park. He instilled the love of sports to his children and grandchildren. One story I vividly remember was going to a Browns game on a cold, blustery day in December in the 70s against the Los Angeles Rams. The temperature must have been in single digits. As we were driving along 90 to get to the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, my dad started to roll down the windows and turn on the air conditioning. I said, "Dad, what are you doing? It's freezing." He said that he wanted us to get used to the cold weather, as we would be sitting in this wintry condition for 3 hours plus. True story. After school this past Wednesday, I went to Montefiore to visit my father. He was listless and was heavily medicated. He was a shadow of a man that was so incredibly strong, both mentally and physically. The doctor told us the end was near. My sisters and I were with him that night, and we're watching the Indians' clinching game against Toronto. As Josh Donaldson's foul ball gently landed in Carlos Santana's mitt, and the players stormed the field, huddled in mass, we cried out, "Dad, the Indians are going to the World Series. The Indians are going to the World Series." He died several hours after the Tribe clinched the American League pennant. I know he could hear us even though he was comatose. He took me to at least 25 Indians games a year. He was a devoted fan, even though the Indians had such abysmal winning percentages as .370, .372, .352 in the 70s and 80s. He loved to play games, Quiddler, Skip-Bo, and Uno. On Saturday mornings, I would get phone calls from my friends to either go bowling, roller skating, or to a movie. I would say to my father, "Dad, are you okay if I go with my friends today?" He would look at me with these sad eyes. I told my friends I couldn't go with them today. My dad's mood changed from sadness to gladness. We would spend all Saturday playing together. Ping pong, pool, trains, racing cars, a baseball game he made out of wood with the little men you put on birthday cakes, table hockey, still going, baseball, football, yes, one-on-one football where you could pass the ball to yourself. Basketball, pulling the cars to the end of the driveway, turning the car headlights on when it got dark. He was a kid at heart. He loved trains. he would have to crawl under the train set and pop up through the middle to fix the trains that got derailed. He loved his friends. He loved his family. And now that his time is over, he can rest peacefully with his parents and sister. He loved life more than anyone I have ever met. And now I'm going to finish my eulogy, reading to you as though I am Norm Potiker in first person. This was my father's jacket. My name is Norman James Potiker. I was born on the 10th of September, 1930. It all began like this. Louis Potiker and Lillian Katz, married. Now the saga begins. First there was Lucille, my oldest sister, who passed away when she was only 48. And then along came Howard. He moved to California in the 50s. People would ask me, how's your brother? And I would say, yes. And then they would say again, how's your brother? He said, yes, how is my brother? I love sports, not especially playing them, but I have an instant recall on facts and figures. My Uncle Norman returned home after spending 2 years in the Aleutian Islands, having nothing to do but lift weights. Upon arriving home, he took one look at his nephew and began a rigorous training program for little Norman, and I was little. At age 15, I was only 5 feet tall and weighed 90 pounds. A 90-pound weakling. By age 17, I had changed a great deal. In 55 years of working out, I have lifted 397,230 tons of weights, give or take 1 or 2. I began my boxing career as an amateur boxer. At age 18, I am sparring in the gym, beginning to have actual fights. I figured I fought about 700 rounds, and if I received 15 blows to the head in each round, I would have received over 1,000 blows to the head. Now, do you understand me better? Norman Van Gogh Potiker goes into the painting business. I became an apprentice sign painter at 15 and beginning signs on buildings and billboards. I am drafted and continued my craft in the service, painting signs for the Army, and even a replacement for Mamie Eisenhower's license plate that was stolen. I returned home from the service from Paris, France. I became a salesman, working on commission and becoming one of the best. I was honored many times as the #1 salesman in my field. I made about 20 sales calls a week, 1,040 a year, or 55,120 in my career. If my rejection rate was 2/3, I would have been rejected 36,810 times. Now, do you understand me better? I marry Margot and become a father to 4 children, Cheryl, Ellen, Lori, and Michael. My children marry, and I become a father-in-law to Danny, Peter, John, and Betsy. I love to garden. I received the Ward 4 Garden of the Year presented to me by Councilwoman Jane Goodman. Many people stop to admire my plantings. Even the deer like my garden too. They have been eating my beautiful tulips. The Valentine's Day Massacre. We have all known the story, having heard it over and over and over. I will always be remembered by Nancy's fourth grade class. She tells them the story and has them send valentines to Mr. Potiker to help him get through that day. Norman J. Potiker, author. I work feverishly on my own autobiography, self-printed and self-published. Engineer Potiker, train number 2015. My children love to see my train layout and all the cars, and also my grandchildren, all the cars that unload milk jugs and cattle and rolling logs, coal cars and passenger cars that light up in the dark. I start backpacking and become a world traveler. Germany, Spain, France, England, Ireland, Morocco, Vienna, Hawaii, Gibraltar, Austria, Virgin Islands, San Juan, and Haiti. Because I become fluent in Spanish, self-taught, as I may say, Mexico is my favorite port of call. My love of animals, I open my home to furry, four-legged things called cats. They have come into my life, and I love them. I'm getting rushed. I'm almost done. They crawl into my lap or knee, or under the covers next to me. Squeaky, Grover, Missy, Emma, and OC, the outside cat. Family is everything to me. 4 of the best, wonderful daughters, Cheryl, Ellen, Lori, and Betsy. 3 great sons-in-law, Danny, Peter, and John. My son, Michael, and the greatest grandchildren ever, Andrew, Craig, Brett, Alex, Kara, Phoebe, Franklin, Lillian, and yes, my great-grandson, Grant James. After 86 years, my dream has come true. I'm cavelling. Look around, all my friends and family here to celebrate me and my life. The sun is setting, the gates are closing. Let me have a moment before I have to go. And by the way, please put this on my epitaph. This is what it's all about. Thank you.
It was so great to have Norman up here with us and sharing his words. He would have been so proud. One of the things that Norman liked the most was a long rabbinical sermon talking about the Jewish portion or the holidays. So I would be remiss without talking for more than 30 minutes about the Jewish holidays. But I'll just say in one minute or less that it's really notable that of all the Jewish holidays that Norman picked, in some ways, to be the time that he would leave this world, it's the holiday of Sukkot. Because as people know, we're on the eve of Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. The last 2 holidays of the Sukkot season. But I believe that many of the messages of Sukkot are exactly what our Norman believed in. Even though he wasn't a person who espoused his religious beliefs in strong ways, a very, very proud Jewish person, but not one to espouse religion. But the fact that we think of Sukkot as a holiday where we sit in a sukkah, we sit in a very simple booth, just a bunch of twigs, some simple wood, nothing between you and the elements, but for these simple things. To remind us who we really are, that after the holidays, after the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, after the spiritual growth, after all the forgiveness, after the faith that we have obtained, it doesn't make us these big superstars in a big house with a fancy car and whatnot. We're just simple people. We're just sitting in the sukkah. We're just enjoying God's goodness and God's grace in a simple way, one with nature, one with the people of this planet. So, and most of all, besides the simplicity of Sukkot, it's a holiday of happiness. It's Zman Simchatenu, the time of our happiness. So what could our Norman have liked more than a time of happiness and a time of simplicity? So I just want to thank everyone for their patience and their humor and the beautiful moments that we had to share together. And I think that Norman would just be so happy that he had this celebration of his life. that, we were able to celebrate him and toast him exactly as he would have been himself. And he would be very, very proud of us and thankful. So we pray together that his memory should be for a blessing, and that his courage, his stubbornness, his kindness, his humor, his love of family, his simply being like a kid should stay with all of us and help us through our dark times in our lives. And we should get through life as efficiently and effectively and get into as much trouble as he had, God willing. So just some simple details. Following the service today, the family will be inviting friends immediately to the Beachmont Country Club, which is 29600 Chagrin Boulevard in Orange, and that will be today only, following services until 8 p.m. If people wish to, they may make a contribution to the Jewish Family Services or to the charity of their choice. I'm going to ask folks to please rise for the recitation of the memorial prayer, and then following the memorial prayer, the family will come forward in the recitation of the Kaddish, and with the saying of the Kaddish, that will conclude our service. El Malei Rachamim, Sheichein Bamrumim, Hamsei Menucha Nechain al Kanfei Hashchina, B'malois Kedoshim Utahirim, Kezayrakia Mazhirim, Es Nishmas, Nachum ben Lili and Veluas, Shahalach Loilamo, Bavor Shanachtul Mispalim Bad Haskras Nishmaso, Began Eden Tehei Menuchaso, L'chein Bal Harachamim, Yastirechu B'seisa Kanafav Li'oilamim, B'yitzor B'tzor Achayim Is Nishmaso, Adonai Hu Nachalaso, V'yanuch Al Mishkavo B'Shalom, V'Neumar, Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones who shine like the glow of the firmament, for the soul of our beloved Norman J. Potiker, who has gone unto his world and for whom we pray. May his resting place be in the Garden of Eden, and may the Master of Mercy shelter him in the shelter of his wings for all eternity. May he bind his soul in the bond of life. God is his heritage, and may he repose in peace on his resting place. And we say together, Amen. Please remain standing for the recitation of the Kaddish.